Hey there, members of the Night Crew, and folks who just love horror. Welcome to the Night Crew podcast, where shadows breathe and monsters listen. This is the podcast where we get cozy with the creepy, the frightening, and the just plain undead. I'm your host, Brad Ricks. Now, before we jump in, a quick reminder that the Night Crew 2 Bloodlust is now available on Amazon and on my website, bradricks.com. Oh, and let me also not forget, I have the Night Crew podcast t-shirts available. Go to my website, order a book or two, and a t-shirt. On today's episode, I sat down with author Bryan W. Alaspa. He's the creative force behind amazing works like Devoured, The Witch of November, and the chilling audio drama When the Night Comes Out. We talk about his collaboration with voice actor Allie James, how his lifetime obsession with monsters shaped his writing career, and the craft of writing fear. Into the virtual studio we go. All right, so today I'm excited to have Bryan Alaspa with me. He's a very prolific author with a ton of great works. Not to mention, he's also the writer behind a podcast, When the Night Comes Out, and we're going to get to talking about that a little bit too. So, Bryan, how are you today?
I'm doing quite well. How are you doing today? I'm doing all right. It's we're recording this on a weekend, which is nice. So I'm always better on those days than not.
I agree. Except at the recording this, I got back from vacation yesterday, and all of my my technology equipment decided to reboot and update this morning. So it's been a wonderfully frantic morning.
Of course.
All right. So I always like to start with the usual wonderful author question of, tell me about your writing. How long you've been writing? What was your first book? What made you want to become a writer?
Well, I started getting interested in the whole idea of writing very young. I was born in 1971. So when I was growing up, everybody had the novel Jaws lying around. And I was obsessed with sharks already, even before I understood there was a book and a movie and it was about to change everything and become the big deal of the mid 70s and then onward forever. So the fact that everybody was carrying this book around with a big shark on the cover fascinated me. And that made me inquire as to, how do these books get made? And my mom or my dad explaining what authors were. And I became fascinated at the idea of being able to do that. And I wrote my very first story, which was 3 pages, single spaced without any proper punctuation, in the 3rd grade, basically a ripoff of Jaws. But so obviously the content was pretty awful and it was really poorly written, but it was so much fun to do that really started my love for it. And from that point forward, I was always the guy who could, when it came to the fiction writing section of English class, I was the one who always, had the scary stories and things like that, because I instantly had a love of horror too, that was put in my head, probably thanks to my dad. And the Universal horror movies and the kaiju films he used to like to watch and things like that. So my very first book that was of any great length came about when I was in college. It was actually the end of high school, beginning of college. I wrote a book called The Ballad of the Blue Denim Gang, which was not horror. It was some kind of like adventure sort of story, really, kind of like a superhero tale. And it was, 500 printed pages. I ultimately self-published that one. It is available out there, but it's not great if you go out and search for it. So I kind of got serious about it after that and started finding people to help me edit. So I consider my real career started in 2006 when a company that was looking for nonfiction writers put out an ad somewhere that I found online. We're looking for authors to write about haunted houses or haunted house tales. These are to be real haunted house tales, if you believe in that. And in various cities. So they were doing books based on, the haunted houses of Chicago, the haunted houses of New York, and they already had somebody doing Chicago. I happened to have lived in St. Louis briefly and went to school there, so I knew a lot about St. Louis ghosts, and so they agreed to let me write a story about that. And that book still sits in gift shops and things like that down in St. Louis, and like museums and things like that. So that one came out in like I said, 2006. And so for a while, for a couple of years, I was writing these weird nonfiction books that were about ghosts or crime or, negative history like Chicago disasters and things like that. At the same time, still writing fiction. And the fiction stuff, I developed my little sphere so that I had editors and beta readers and people like that. And I was still doing a lot of self-publishing. And honestly, it wasn't until really Wicked House came along that I found a publisher, and then a bunch of other people started launching their own publishing houses. And now I publish a lot with a company called Bainham Press Books. And so for the last couple of years, I've been publishing through some of these small presses. And but a lot of the stuff you find out there is stuff that I did through my own sort of vanity press kind of deal. So I was cranking out, quite a few books a year for a while there, but at least a book a year, and sometimes more. But so that's how I got to be the guy with so many darn books out there. It was just, all my spare time was spent writing books. So,
how do you find the research side of things is different when you're doing nonfiction versus fiction?
There's a reason I don't write as much nonfiction anymore. It is a lot of work. When I was writing those books, I wasn't married, wasn't even in like a relationship. All I basically had was the day job, and then sitting at home. And so I've always been a guy who likes to do research. I'm forever the guy who goes down rabbit holes. I become hyper fixated on certain things at certain times. And so, I would start.
I think the club has a t-shirt too. I'll have to find mine somewhere.
Exactly. Right now I'm hyper fixated on old time radio, which has always been an obsession with mine. And every so often it comes back around. So I've been re-listening to old horror broadcasts and The Shadow and great stuff like that. And so now I've become obsessed with that. Shadow. I love The Shadow to the point where I want to create my own pulp fiction hero now. I'm like, I have an idea in my head and I'm like, do I really waste time doing this or do I go back to the horror stories? But anyway, so I would spend evenings just researching, and it is interesting. Writing a nonfiction book is like doing a term paper, when not to jump ahead into my writing process, when I write in fiction, I don't really do outlines or things like that. I just let it kind of flow. But not with my nonfiction. With my nonfiction, because I gather so much information from so many different places, I have to put it in an outline form and then try to follow that so I can keep it organized. And again, it's a lot like a term paper. You got to keep track of all your stuff. So it's a challenge.
Get your outlining, all that good stuff.
Exactly. Get that done. And then make sure you have the right bibliography. It's a lot of work. And honestly, it's rewarding when it's out. And sometimes those nonfiction ones, like I said, are the ones that will pop up in the weirdest places, like literally on physical shelves all of a sudden. I did one, Forgotten Tales of Illinois, for a press. It was just weird stories in and around the state of Illinois where I live. And this is during COVID. I was getting my first shot at a CVS near Peoria, because that's how far I had to drive to find a spot to get a shot at that time. And on this book rack was Forgotten Tales of Illinois, just sitting there. I'm like, quick, take a picture of me. It's so weird where it will just pop up. And by the way, I don't think any author ever gets tired of seeing their books on shelves. I'm willing to bet to this day, Stephen King gets a kick out of going into a bookstore and seeing all his work on a shelf, because there's something so cool about that. So I like that. But it is weird how I haven't written a nonfiction book now in years. And yet those ones that I did back in the early aughts pop up from time to time and will suddenly become popular, and I'll get a decent royalty check, twice a year. And I'm like, someone's checking out the crime book, things like that. I don't know why, whatever. So, yeah.
All right. Well, so my next question then. So, I guess you kind of hinted at it when you talk about, from a little bit from what you said your dad liked, the Universal movies and, kaiju. So, the Godzillas and all that good stuff. But just in general, why horror?
Horror is just fun. I don't know. I guess I've always had a morbid brain. Like I said, I mean, I was obsessed with Jaws at a very young age, even before that, and would read these books on sharks and things like that, and be fascinated at the idea of shark attacks and weird stuff like that. So, and again, my dad used to like to watch that. Here in Chicago, we've had various horror hosts on who pop up on Saturday. The longest running one, a guy who goes by the name Svengoolie. And he used to be on every Saturday, and he would show a horror movie and make bad jokes and comments and things like that. And I love those guys. I'm fascinated that like every town, every city, no matter how small, if there was a TV station, there was probably a horror host who did a show on a Friday or Saturday night. And I love that. And it was just fascinating to me. And I don't know why, this morbid fascination with death or something. I don't know. And I mean, when I think back about it and I think about the movies, the kaiju films, I know I did watch Godzilla, and probably some of the sillier Godzilla ones are the ones my dad let me watch. But I'm pretty sure what they used to run here on like Saturday afternoons, probably because they knew kids were watching, were a lot of the Gamera, the giant flying turtle. And those are very kid friendly because Gamera becomes a friend to children, everywhere. He started out as a monster and then became so giant monsters were creepy. And then I just started liking, like the werewolf and some of the Universal ones as I got older. And by older, I mean, going from 5 years old, watching some of those kaiju movies to 8 years old, watching monster movies. And they would show those again here on TV, sometimes just in the afternoon. I'd be flipping through TV channels, and all of a sudden there was, an old Universal horror film on Channel 9, WGN, or Channel 32 here in Chicago in the afternoon. And sometimes they'd have theme weeks even. I remember one of the channels used to have like a, nature horror week, and you'd see bad movies like Frogs and Empire of the Ants and things like that. And so I don't know. It was always more fun to watch horror movies, and because in 1976, 77, my dad invested what must have been a lot of money at the time in a VCR. I mean, we got one of the early ones, giant, top loading Betamax. It looked like paneling on the side. The thing was so heavy and gigantic. And
instruction manual that's about as big as the books behind me are. Yeah.
And then he started getting bootleg videos for a very brief time. We only really had a couple. And then you could buy movies, and then all of a sudden the first video stores popped up in the early 80s. And when you'd walk in there, one side would be VHS, one side would be Betamax, and we would get movies, and we'd get a movie or two that like the whole family could watch. And then my dad and I would pick out a horror movie that he and I would watch together. And we did that for a long time. And that's when I got introduced to all of the classic like slashers. I got introduced to, that's when I first saw Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and the Friday the 13th movies, and on and on to some of those, those classic ones, the Boogeyman, the original one from the 80s. And that one actually scared me. My Bloody Valentine, all the ones related to holidays. It was great. And, also things like Alien, though, like for a while, Alien became my favorite movie over Jaws for a brief time. So it's just, I don't know. It's just always been a fascination with me. And I love it. And I love to immerse myself in horror and horror movies and horror literature. It's just always been there.
So I know you mentioned kaiju a few times. So the first book I read of yours, which is a kaiju novel, so Devoured. Yeah. So talk a little bit about Devoured.
Devoured is a book that kicked around in my head, what I call my mental rock polisher, for gosh, well over 10 years. I mean, I went to school, as I mentioned earlier, I went to college at a place called Webster University in St. Louis, and it was definitely a liberal arts college, encouraged writing. There were lots of filmmakers. There were lots of other writers, and I got briefly into radio for a time. And we were all like, we'd like to go exploring on things. And over across the Mississippi River, near a town called Alton, Illinois, there is a giant painting on a wall of a creature. Now, it's a reproduction of something that was actually seen by early explorers and like Lewis and Clark. And it was painted on the side of a limestone cliff by Native Americans. Some joker came along, of course, some white dude, and invented a story around it, called it the Piasa bird, and invented a story about, this giant flying creature was devouring people and animals, and this great chief who like sacrificed himself so that his best hunters could take down the creature. And it turns out, again, he just made that up because he was trying to sell his own books at the time. We don't exactly know what the creature was. It's still known as the Piasa bird. We believe, I think now, that it's just another example of Native American thunderbirds, who kind of ruled the air. And then there were these underwater creatures who ruled the lakes and the rivers and things. It just stuck in my head. I was like, what if that thing was real? What if that thing was an actual drawing of something that ancient people had seen? And that stuck in my head. And for the longest time, I could not figure out a way to tell that story without massively offending every Native American person who read it. So kicked around. And then all of a sudden, I literally went back to my love of Jaws, of all things, and said, why don't you narrow it down and just have three main characters who are chasing after this creature that has been asleep for centuries and is now awake, and it's terrorizing St. Louis. And the image I had in my head was this creature perched on top of the St. Louis Arch, this giant dragon-like creature, shrieking and screaming. And I'm like, okay, I need to do that. And so I sat down and did that. And so it's funny when I've had a few criticisms, like, why at the end of the book is it like three guys going after this? And I'm like, if you'd only known the inspiration, guys, like if I could have had them putting yellow barrels into this thing, I would have done it as my nod toward Jaws.
Not with three barrels.
Yeah, exactly. And so I know it takes a little suspension of disbelief, but I loved. And then the great part about writing fiction is you can do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about budgets and how that's going to look. You just have to describe it. So I could destroy huge swaths of downtown St. Louis or whatever. And it kind of became fun and, quite frankly, a little maniacal in the way that I was tearing apart buildings and the arch itself and, and stuff like that. But it was a lot of fun. And yeah, it was definitely also influenced by a few things. Jaws. There is a 70s movie with David Carradine in it, I believe, called Q, the Winged Serpent. It's a weird movie that imagines that the ancient Aztec serpent god with wings called Quetzalcoatl from the Aztecs exists and has a nest at the top of the Chrysler Building. And there's so many great scenes. The special effects are laughable. They're awful. But Michael Moriarty, the actor Michael Moriarty, plays a guy who discovers this bird, and he starts luring people up to the Chrysler Building who have done him wrong. He owes the mob lots of money. And so there's this fantastic scene where he convinces them he's hidden the money at the top of the building, and he lures them up there. And of course, the giant creature starts eating him, and he's running away, and he's just screaming, "Eat him! Eat him!" And it's so great. It's so much of that movie is great. The special effects are just dreadful. So that influenced me. And then my love of the kaiju films. I mean, I'm a Godzilla fan going way back, and even Gamera, who doesn't, I think, get enough respect these days because he went all friendly really fast. Yeah. And then, like I said, then Jaws, the idea of just like three dudes who are trying to stop this seemingly unstoppable creature just appealed to me. And finally I had my story and I had the way into it. while still paying respect as much as I could to Native American culture. Our characters, kind of like Hooper, is steeped in it and keeps commenting how, like, the whole story, the legend behind this creature is all made up by white dudes and things like that. And, some of that stuff I put out there, to try to at least tip my hat to that. But, and then I went ahead and wrote a damn sequel to the thing. So, it's like, didn't stick my neck out far enough to get lopped off by various Native American tribes, and now I'm doing it again. So yeah.
So and just real quick, so so that movie's called Q, the Winged Serpent. Yeah. It came out in 1982.
Yeah, it's worth watching, guys. It's so much fun. The movie is. The movie has its tongue kind of firmly in its cheek too. It's just so worth checking out. I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the stills, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is right up my alley.
Yeah, it's so much.
Oh, good. It's streaming on Prime Video. Great. So, I know what my Sunday what happened to my day.
He's just screaming, "Eat them! Eat them!" It's just, I laugh, and there's just enough gore for the people who like their blood and guts in there too. But it's so crazy. It's funny. It's scary. Well, actually not that scary, but. Anyway, if you like carnage and chaos and giant creatures, this is a good one to check out if you missed it.
Yep. That'll be on my watch list. Yay. Now you said you wrote a sequel. Yeah, so, and I believe the sequel's coming. Well, at the time of this recording, it's coming out soon. I think by the time this releases, it'll already be out. So FYI, it'll already be out. So let's talk about it for a second.
It's called The Witch of November. And that title probably deserves a little explanation too, but it is definitely the sequel to Devoured. The surviving characters from the first novel are up here again in this one, only now they're in a different position. In the first novel, Logan Field, kind of our main hero, is the St. Louis safety manager. And well, now that monsters have been proven real in the first novel, the government, of course, now wants to take experts that, people they think are experts and make it so that they can stop any other monsters from coming up and doing more damage. And Logan is now part of that organization. And we bring back the character Mike from the first novel as well. And only this time, I kind of set it up at the end of Devoured, because at the end of Devoured, there's an epilogue where some people are kayaking in Lake Superior and a underwater creature comes up and attacks them. And again, this goes back to almost the same myth, the Thunderbirds who ruled the air. And then something that, again, was sort of like the way the Native Americans painted it, it was sort of like a cat-like face to it. And then like a sea serpent sort of body or sea monster sort of body with spikes on the back. And so the translation, I can't remember now the exact Native American words, and I'd probably butcher it if I tried to say it anyway. Translated into underwater panther. That's what the white people called it, because of the weird cat-like face and the sea monster body. And it was steeped in all kinds of cool stuff, because not only did it rule the underwater and underworld and things like that, it could also summon storms and things like that too on the Great Lakes and from where it was. And so the Native Americans believed there was a constant battle between, the sky and the sea, and, these two creatures were sort of at odds with each other. So The Witch of November takes place predominantly again in the Midwest, a lot of it up in Lake Superior. And it combines some other obsessions. The term Witch of November comes straight out of my fascination with the sinking of the tanker ship in the late 70s, the Edmund Fitzgerald, which also was, of course, a Gordon Lightfoot song, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And in that song, several times he mentions the Witch of November, which was a sailor's term, because on Lake Superior and a lot of the Great Lakes, for some reason, when November comes and before the waterways are shut down because ice forms, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, and some of the others are known for these weird freak storms that just seem to develop out of nowhere. And that's what the Fitzgerald got caught in and sank. I mean, the Fitzgerald was so big It was 780 feet long. If you were to stand it on end, it would be 100 feet taller than the St. Louis Arch. It was massive, and it sank in an instant because the storms were so bad. And that always fascinated me. So there is an Edmund Fitzgerald-like ship in my new novel. I took the term Witch of November based on that, and sort of imagine, though, what if this creature was the one who summoned that storm, and ended up, so there's a really like a sea battle between this ship and this creature that kind of becomes the center point of the story. But I fill it in with Logan and others from the first novel trying to figure out what's going on, because this creature just keeps, like, boaters are disappearing, freak storms keep getting reported, body parts are washing up on shore, all the horror trope things. And so, so I just wanted to tell the story from, like, the underwater creature, the underwater panther type creature. So, it ended up being, again, a lot of fun, because now I could set it while in the Midwest. Like with all sequels, it expands a little bit. So now, because he can swim his way through to all the Great Lakes, that means I could have him attack Detroit and Milwaukee and Chicago and, like, all these places that are in and around the Great Lakes. The Sioux Locks, have a whole scene together, which is the point between two, Lake Superior and another lake. And, so it was just, again, a lot of fun, because now all of a sudden I can have this creature popping up all over the place. And causing chaos in various cities, and really amping up the kaiju and the disaster element to it. So, it's a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. So that'll right now it's coming out on Halloween. It will have been released October 31st by the time the actual podcast comes out. So it's just. Right. I don't know if I have any more. I've looked up. There are a lot of different Native American monsters, but none of them have triggered my imagination the way these two really kaiju level giant monsters have. A lot of the other ones are smaller and no less creepy, but I haven't come up with the stories. And how much do I continue to mine, like, another culture for my horror? I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I know Devoured was a lot of fun. I enjoyed reading it. And so I'll definitely be picking up Witch in November when it comes out. Cause, like I said, Devoured was definitely a lot of fun.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So getting back to, a couple just, the normal, generic questions. Yeah. So what do you find is the most difficult part of writing a book?
Oh, gosh. For me, what is the most difficult part? Well, the basic thing is, it used to be easy for me to find time to write, but it seems like the older I get, the more I want to sleep in, the harder it gets for me to find, because I'm usually the most productive in the morning. And so, it was much easier to get up early to do it when I was younger. So there's that part of it. It's actually just, there's always this sense of stepping off of a cliff for me when I first start a novel. Like I said, I don't have a lot of safety nets when I start writing. I don't have an outline. I have an idea in my head, and hopefully that works and continues to flow the story to me. And if I hit a wall, it's rough. And so those first few sentences, the first scene is often the most challenging, because I'm really hoping that I set it up properly, that I have grabbed the reader enough that they want to continue to read. I have a tendency to, when I do my first draft in the beginning, I set up way too much exposition and have to cut a lot of that out, so that, and try to sprinkle it throughout the rest of the novel. There's this desire for me to want to set up too much. And I'm like, people are reading this for the horror aspect, and you don't get to the horror until, like, page 10. You need to cut out, quite a few pages here, Bryan, and try to spread it throughout. So that can be a real challenge for me. And other than that, the writing generally comes pretty easy for me. I'm lucky in that regard. Once I kind of just know when a story has clicked in my brain. It's like, the penny has dropped in my head, and I just know, like, I think I've got it. I think I think I can write this now. If I try to do it too early, the story will sputter out. And I have quite a few half finished, quarter finished books in my, my hard drive that I really kind of jumped on it too early and probably didn't think it, let it spin around in the rock polisher for a little while yet. But when it hits, it's almost like there's something burning in the middle of my head. I don't even know how else to describe it. Like, I have to get it out. So whether I was published ever again by another publisher, I would continue to write these stories because they happen whether I want them to or not. And so I have to get them on paper, whatever that is. So to me, that's usually the starting point. There's a little bit of a hold your breath and jump kind of aspect to it that's always a little scary. Am I going to get this right? Am I going to get it? Thank God for, second and third drafts, but still, I want to get it as close to right. I want to get what I'm seeing in my head onto the page. And it's always like tough at the beginning to get it going. Once I get going and get past that, forget about it. Every morning I'm writing, 500 to 1,000 words on the next book. But that first thing, and then, of course, sometimes doing edits is a pain because, as I've said, sometimes these stories sit in my head for 10 years or more before I decide it's time to write them. And it's like, and now you want me to go back and rewrite this thing that took me 10 years to get out of my head? I'm done with this story. I'm on to the next shiny thing.
I'm on to the next one.
Yeah. And so that can be a challenge for me. But I've gotten better at that and listening to editors, which was a problem for me at one point, and beta readers and things like that. I had to learn to put my ego aside a lot when I started trying to do this, in any real sense. So, yeah, so that can be a challenge too, though. You still got to drag me kicking and screaming into the editing process after my editors and beta readers get back to me. So.
Yep, I know that feeling. Yeah. Well, I always joke, that my wife is usually the first one who reads my stuff, and she used to be a teacher, so she goes through and edits. She does the editing, kind of first round before I even ever send it off anywhere. And I print it out for her, and she's sitting there marking it up, and she hands me the draft back, and I look through, and it looks like I failed a paper. Like,
oh yeah,
there's nothing but red ink all over this.
Oh my gosh, yeah. My wife,
like, is there a single sentence that doesn't have a mark on it?
My wife can be my harshest critic too, and she is the one who will, even after I do multiple edits, if she gets a chance to reread it, will find the one thing that I missed and bring it up to me. And I'll get mad, usually at her, even though it's my fault. I'll be like, damn it, why did you have to find that? Now I got to go back and fix that, and it's so annoying.
I saw a meme or a joke once. It said, the best way to find an error or a typo in your book is to write it, have it go through betas, have it go through your ARC readers, have it go through 3 rounds of editing and 3 rounds of proofreading, have it go to print, and then randomly walk by, pick it up, and open up a page. And that's where you'll find them.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. And, not to ever disparage readers, because they're what make our whole job fun, but there are some who love to find those errors and then point them out. I'm like, this needed a better editor. And I'm like, you have no idea how many rounds of edits this went through. We're all just human. And sometimes little things get missed, I have an example. It's actually in To Hell with Hallmark, where the editor, like a reader commented, because I use the word snugly, but if it's with 1 G, it's like an adjective. If it's with 1 G is an adverb and 2 G's is an adjective. Oh my God. I used the wrong one. Oh my God. Like, really? It's like, yes. Should it have probably been caught at some point? Yes. Are both of those a word that, both, whether you're using Scrivener or Word or Google Docs, is it going to find it? Yes. No, it's not. No, it's not. And, there's still one, though. One edit that for some reason I have brought to the publisher's attention many times. And for some reason they have not gone and fixed it. So, and it's in one of my nonfiction books. I was talking about the famous novel called The Jungle, which was written about the Chicago meatpacking plants that were dominant across the South Side at one point, the turn of the century. And I attributed the wrong author. I attributed a local Chicago guy who was a poet and not the actual author. Now, of course, I can't remember either of their names off the top of my head now that I'm on the podcast. But and I felt so stupid. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And I repeatedly have sent it to the publisher and said, hey, on page whatever, like in the next printing, could you please fix this? And they still have not fixed it. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a cost thing. I don't know if they just don't care. I don't know what it is. I don't want to disparage, my publisher in any way, but it's just one page right in the beginning of the book. And for some reason, they just have never fixed that I attributed the wrong author. And so people still comment on it. And I'm like, I've told them I'm aware. I've done all I can, and they're not fixing it. So I don't know what to tell you. Write them, and tell them anyway, that's neither here nor there. I just hate when like weird things like that happen. When you self-publish, it's easy. If you find an error, you just go in, you fix it, you republish it. But when you're dealing with a publisher, I don't know. For some reason, sometimes the channels just shut down on you. So
yeah, true. All right, so I'm gonna ask a question that I know is I've heard is probably one of the more difficult ones. But of all the books that you've written, what would you say is your favorite?
Yeah, that is a difficult one. That is very hard because usually it's whatever one is coming out next for me. But I do have a few that like are standouts in my mind. And one of them is actually the first time I did something that was more of a young adult book. But and at the time when I started it, I didn't know it was going to be until I started writing it. And I kind of took a step back and I went, this kind of has a YA vibe to it. And it's the closest I've ever come to writing a love story. So it's like a ghostly vanishing hitchhiker love story thing called Sapphire. And the reason I'm so proud of that book is it's a long one, and it's one of those ones where I have a lot of different characters, and somehow it all kind of came together at the end. And then I went through a real harsh and long editing process with an editor. And at the beginning, I was kind of having a temper tantrum about some of the edits she was suggesting. And only when I stepped away from myself and my ego and went back and committed to doing the rewrite she was suggesting that I realized, oh yeah, shoot, this is a much better book because of her edits. Like, I should listen. I should really shut up and listen, swallow my pride and listen to these people. And so to me, it just came out even better than I thought it was. And so I really love that one. There's another one called The Man from Taured, Taured, that's kind of become my ultimate bestseller. And I still to this day don't know why. I published it 2015, 2016. It did okay at the time, and it's based on an urban legend about the man from Taured, who the legend says showed up on an airplane and then landed in 1950s Japan, only to say he had a passport from this country called Taured, which doesn't exist. And so people are like, oh, that's proof of alternate realities. And I just said it in a modern setting and said, what would it be like today if some guy showed up claiming to be from a country that didn't exist, and, Homeland Security and TSA had to get involved and all this other stuff. And it became the longest book I've written. And it did okay when it launched. And then all of a sudden in 2019, years after it was published, it started selling like crazy. And I have no idea to this day why. I don't know if somebody somewhere talked about the urban legend and in a place where a lot of people heard it, or for some reason people just started researching it. I wish I knew, because man, if I could have that magic formula, everything I publish would come out and be great. And then the book that came out earlier this year is called The Given. I did that one, and that's sort of a cult horror, psychological thriller kind of story. And there was some personal stuff that I dealt with in that story, and so I ended up really sort of liking that one a lot. And appreciating that one a lot when it came out. And when I first wrote it, I thought maybe I went too personal and maybe it doesn't work. And it kind of sat in my folder for a while. And then I decided to resurrect it. And lo and behold, somebody said, yeah, we like this. We're going to publish this. And I was like, great. So I'm kind of proud of that one too.
Awesome. All right. So before I jump into the, my wonderful, what's your favorite monster kind of question, I do want to talk about the podcast that you do with, it's Allie James, right?
Allie James.
She's the voice behind it. But you are the words behind it.
Yeah.
And the podcast name is, When the Night Comes Out.
Yep.
So tell me what kind of brought that on?
I've had an obsession with old time radio and radio in general since I was a kid. When I used to get, other kids were buying music cassettes, I was buying Orson Welles's War of the Worlds or old cassettes with some of, there were so many great little, they call them horror shows. They're not super scary, but some of them are creepy and gruesome, like Suspense and things like that. They were a little more Twilight Zone-y. I buy collections of those. And then The Shadow has always been a favorite of mine. Again, back to Orson Welles. And I just always wanted to do some kind of radio type thing. And, for the longest time, I was even in radio briefly, mostly part-time. But, and playing music is fine, but I wanted to do those old time radio shows. And then suddenly podcasting became a thing. And I was like, this is it. This is my chance. Allie James had done an audiobook version of a collection of short stories I had. And I met her through that. As soon as I heard her audition, I was like, oh my God, this is my voice. This is the closest I've ever heard to the voice that I hear in my head when I'm writing. Like, she just gets me. She gets what the writing is supposed to be like and sound like and feel like. And when I was listening to all of the different chapters and the different stories, I thought, this could have been a podcast. We could have done this as a podcast, and each episode would have been a next short story. I'm like, I got a bunch of other short stories. Allie, would you want to do a podcast like version of this with me? And we tried different platforms before settling on one that seemed to work to help give us at least a little bit of money. We don't really make much from it. But that would help spread it out everywhere. So it's on Spotify and Apple, tuned on iTunes and all those places. And now we've got it on YouTube. And it just became fun for us. And so every year I would write a whole bunch of short stories. Sometimes I'd publish those. Sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes they'd just be exclusive to the podcast. And she would do them and she would add her production elements. And then we decided to take an unpublished novel called The Hive that I had kind of half written. And I quickly finished writing it. And it's kind of my take on a zombie sort of tale. And I said, what do we do this? And just do the whole thing. And it went all year long. And that finished in December of 2024. And we were both kind of exhausted from that. We were both like, me hurrying up to write it, her hurrying up to record it and produce it. And for a year, and we took all that time off. And then this year I said, for some reason in 2025, I became short story guy after writing novel after novel after novel. I've written a ton of short stories this year for anthologies and things like that. And I said, I've got a bunch of new short stories. How about we pick a few and do a Halloween special? And then after that, you can decide whether or not you want to do another season, maybe, because some challenges had popped up in her life as well as mine. And, doing the podcast became a little bit of a burden. And we just suddenly found ourselves at a point where we had time and felt like doing it again. And so the Halloween special will be out October 31st, but of course available to listen to anytime. And it's definitely an anthology type series, except for the season we did the one novel, and usually short stories, and they're all kind of creepy. And I've written some really creepy ones this year. So if we do a season that'll come out either late this year or maybe next year, I think we got some really good stuff ready to come out. So, wherever you find your podcast, look for When the Night Comes Out, and hopefully you enjoy Allie's production and my writing. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. And what's crazy is I sometimes forget that I'm even part of it. It almost doesn't feel like mine sometimes. It's so out of the realm, those stories I'm done with. And then Allie does her magic with them. And then I feel like it almost becomes her thing, because she really produces them and turns them into amazing things with her talent. So, it's a lot of fun though. And I like I said, I kind of forget that I even involved with it at some point.
No, from a writing standpoint, when you're writing something for a podcast versus your normal, like a short story or a novel, do you find that you have to tweak your writing style for a podcast versus what you would typically do for just the normal medium of just reading?
The way we do it is I tend to write it just as a short story first, because it's my story. So I may end up using it to submit to an anthology. I may publish it myself for like a 99-cent thing for Kindle only. I've been known to do that with my short stories. If I can't find a home for it, I edit the heck out of it. And then I publish it myself for Kindle, and I consider it like my appetizers. People can spend less than $1 on a short story, and if they like it, maybe they'll buy one of my books. And then usually when Allie gets a hold of it, she will do some edits and rewrites and add, like, I'd like to put, a music sting here, and I want to add this sound effect here. She'll send the script back to me, and we create a kind of script format. At this point, she and I have been doing this long enough that I trust her. I usually just will look at it now and go, yeah, that's perfect. Like, I don't have no notes for me. So she will then record it. She'll send it to me to listen to. But again, I now trust her so much. I'm usually like, I end up giddy like a kid. Like, I'm like, oh my God, this sounds so great. This is amazing. Thank you. And we move forward. And I usually am the guy who loads it up online and adds the descriptions to it and schedules it for a public, a date when it gets pushed out there. And yeah, we've just formed this crazy little partnership where, I will write it my way first. She will take her way to make it more radio friendly. I will generally approve it. And yeah, we just kind of go back and forth with it. And on occasion, I'll maybe add a voice, but it's generally just her. And what's funny is when I go back and listen to some of these old time radio shows, I used to think, oh, I wish we had a big grand cast of characters who could do like full radio plays. But there was a lot of times in the old time radio ones where people were literally just reading like Edgar Allan Poe and stuff like that, and with additional spooky sound effects. So we aren't that far off from the old time radio feel that I like.
Nice. Yeah. And I've started doing, so at the time of our recording, I just recently I switched away from doing my vampire stuff, and I had a werewolf episode come out, and I started the episode instead of just jumping right into, let's talk about werewolves. Yeah. I did a small little, almost short story of somebody walking through the woods. Yeah. And I played with some sound effects, and it was different. It was interesting figuring out how to kind of change the writing a little bit so that it played more in your head versus and what you're hearing and stuff versus just reading. Because you do have that other medium to use that you can take advantage of.
Sure. And I mean, someday we may end up being able to bring in some other voices and may do that ultimate radio play that is in my head. But right now, I just kind of like it. I like listening to what Allie does to it, the elements she adds to it. And she actually is so good. She does different voices and stuff all on her own. We'll add echo and things like that. Yeah. She's just amazing to listen to. She's so talented. So,
well, at some point, if you ever need a cast of characters, I wouldn't mind jumping in.
I'll keep that in mind. Someday I'm going to do my own pulp old-timey radio hero in the vein of The Shadow and things like that someday, somehow. So we may need some additional voices for that if I ever. And of course, mine is going to have a definite horror element. Not that The Shadow didn't. There were always elements of it, but yeah. So one of these days.
All right. So kind of shifting gears. So, I started the Night Crew podcast as a spinoff of my own series, The Night Crew, which is about a team of monster hunters. Yep. And since all of my scripted episodes are deep dives into some kind of a creature, one of the caveats on coming to the podcast is you got to talk about your favorite horror creature. Sure. So what's your favorite monster?
Oh my gosh, this is a very difficult question, and I've been thinking about it in the back of my head during the whole time we're talking. And it's hard for me to pick just one. That's the crazy thing. And it has changed over the years, of course, too, because like I said, there was a point where the xenomorph from Alien would probably have been my favorite. And then, going back to my Universal horror days, at one point it was probably, Frankenstein's monster or the werewolf. Actually, I always liked the werewolf. I always like werewolves better than vampires. And I don't know why. Something about vampires comes across to me as at times, like whiny. They're like, whoa, woe is me. I'm a creature of the dark. I just have to,
I blame Anne Rice for that, by the way.
I do. And of course, the what are those? The sparkly vampire ones too.
Don't get me started on the sparklies.
Something cool about becoming a wolf to me was always just cooler than being a bloodsucker. But like now, if you were to ask me my favorite Universal monster, it's the Invisible Man, which most people are surprised by. But when you look at the original Invisible Man with Claude Rains, he has the highest body count of any of the Universal monsters, all because of one scene where Invisible, he sneaks into a train switching station and alters the tracks and drives a train of 100 people off a cliff and kills everybody on board. So in one fell swoop, he kills 100 people. I mean, so like he has the highest body count of all of them. And there's just something about Rains's portrayal of that, despite not being seen through most of it. You don't really see him until the very end. That makes it one of my favorites. But and then, of course, there's my kaiju era. Always been a Godzilla guy. Love Godzilla. Had a Godzilla toy when I was a kid. Would make little things and have them stomp on them. It was just so great. Something about when you're a kid and you have a giant monster, it appeals to you. And then as I got older, I got into yeah.
Come on, you got to pick one. Come on.
I would probably say, okay. If I really did have to pick one, the one that's probably influenced me the most as a writer, the one who changed my whole way of thinking about horror and thinking about writing would have been H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu. He combines many elements of monsters that I like. He's really big, so he fits into that kaiju mold. He's in the sea, which goes back to my days of liking Jaws and things like that. He hides now because he's asleep, waiting for that day to awaken if you follow the story. So in a way, he is invisible, yet he's still influencing things that are going on in the day-to-day world because he has such a powerful mind. He can cause people to do things for him to try to prepare for the return of the great old ones. And it launched my whole obsession with the idea of alternate realities, different dimensions, old-timey giant gods that are hiding in places that are just out of sight of humans. The Man from Taured deals with that. And over time, I have included my own takes on both Cthulhu, his cult. I have a novella called Mythos that's basically all about the idea of discovering that there's a Cthulhu type cult. And he's just crazy. The whole concept is crazy of what he looks like with the tentacles all over his face and the wings and I don't know. There's just something about him that I find so fascinating and creepy and scary. And Lovecraft's writing is not necessarily what I consider great. In a lot of regards, the actual stories. I feel like his writing is a little stiff. There's a lot of sentences and the monster was beyond description. It was so terrifying. I'm like, well, you're supposed to describe it, dude. But the characters and the mythos he has created is massive and influential. And it's influenced me and it opened my mind to different ideas about where horror could be, what horror could be. It's probably why I haven't really written straightforward vampire stories myself, or I've come close. I've toyed with that, in a short story or two. My zombies are never quite zombies. I have one short story that came out this week that's kind of a nod to werewolves, but it isn't really a werewolf. It's always just one step away from those. It's just because he got my mind thinking in alternate ways, and so. If I had to pick one, it would probably be that guy. That guy would be the one that really changed things for me.
Gotcha. Now, so as you're talking about it, made me think, I hear, from a lot of authors and, Lovecraftian horror and all that is something that tends to be a big influence. I know even, Stephen King talked about, Lovecraft was a big influence of his and all. But from a movie standpoint, I don't seem you don't have Cthulhu is not some big, in the movies, creature. And so some of that Lovecraftian, do you think it's that kind of horror really doesn't translate into media, into film very well, or what? It's a big influence to a lot of writers that, that are huge, but yet it doesn't seem to have the film aspect as what a lot of others do.
There have been a few attempts, and I don't think any of them have been truly successful. Stuart Gordon did From Beyond right after he did Reanimator, and it's lesser known, and that's based on a Lovecraft story. And then years later, a terrific low budget horror film called Banshee Chapter with Ted Levine in it also takes its influence from Beyond. A great creepy horror movie that plays with shadow rather than making you see the full monster through most of it. And honestly, I watched it on my laptop at night with the lights out, and it scared the crap out of me. And then I actually happen to like the Nick Cage adaptation of Color Out of Space. Some people are like, oh, he's too Nick Cage. I'm like, you can never have enough Nick Cage. And I actually like that one. And there is a movie starring Kristen Stewart that's set underwater, where it turns out Cthulhu is the big bad at the end, but I haven't seen that one, and I can't for the life of me remember what it's called now. But I just don't think it's ever translated. What's weird is that enough people know about it that even South Park has made fun of it. I remember there's an episode where somebody's trying to do something and they accidentally release Cthulhu, and they do a news report and you see Cthulhu tearing apart the town or the city behind them.
I remember that episode.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's like he has influenced enough of the culture that people know him, but for some reason there is so many times they've tried to adapt his one novel length story, Mountains of Madness, into a movie.
That's like in the Mouth of Madness with Sam Neill is a
nod to that. But what Guillermo del Toro, I believe, was obsessed with getting Mountains of Madness made and spent a lot of time working on it, and then it just never happens. There are weird stuff in that, like giant penguins and things like that, but still, it's his one story that is connected to it. And I just don't know why people are afraid to tackle it. I don't know what it is about him that causes people to pause and go, yeah, I don't know if this is going to work as a movie. Again, I think there's a lot of descriptions where he fails to fully describe what the character is. They're often formless and shapeless, and they just cause people to go instantly insane and things like that. That was a big deal for him. And then Lovecraft himself is problematic because, of course, once he died and we found some of his private writings, we found out, he was kind of a blatant racist and things like that. But, it's one of those ones where you try to separate the artist from the art kind of situations.
Right.
And again, his writing is not great and descriptive. He tends to be short sentences to the point. So maybe that's a problem for some filmmakers to I can't conceive of what this looks like, so I don't know how to put it on film exactly. I don't know. But I feel like there's a lot there that's just untapped, and I don't know why people don't want to dive into it.
Yeah. Underwater was the name of the movie with Kristen Stewart.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Turns out there's a Cthulhu is sorry to spoil the ending, but yeah, you find out at the end that's who's there and causing all the problems or whatever. I hear it's actually pretty good, but I have not seen it. I've not sat down to watch it. Maybe I should do that this Halloween.
So I was trying to think. I think I have seen that movie, but I don't remember. So which is maybe a bad thing. It's one of those that's it's so forgettable that you.
Yeah, I highly.
I don't remember if I did or not.
I highly recommend the one. It's a terrible title, Banshee Chapter, which is funny because I've seen that movie several times. I still don't remember those two words being used within the movie, so I don't understand why they titled it that. But forget the title and watch the movie, and you'll see how really good horror can be done on a very small budget using just inferences and shadows and half glimpsed creatures and mirrors. And if you watch it with the lights out late at night, it'll really scare the hell out of you, I think. So
Nice. All right. So I know we're getting kind of towards the end here, but so outside of writing, what are your hobbies?
Well, I love movies. I go to movies or watch movies a lot. And I watch too much television, way too much TV. And then I like to read, of course. So I'm always reading something right now. Like, did I freeze? Oh, no, there I go. Sorry, I thought I froze up there for a second. I like to read. Right now I'm reading old pulp fiction. I'm reading like The Shadow and stuff like that. And meanwhile, I have a to be read file of horror novels that's just stacked to the ceiling that I'm not reading. And instead of reading those, I'm reading other things. Yeah. And so, my wife and I are not big travelers, and I live in the Chicago area. So we just like spending time with our dogs and things like that. Writing takes up a lot of my time, and then there's the day job. So, weekends are spent running errands. So, my hobbies tend to be, like I said, lots of reading, lots of going to see movies when I can, or watching movies, catching up on TV shows I might've missed, and things like that. Music. I like music a lot. I'm the guy who's singing in the car next to you, probably, like nobody can see me, and things like that. So, so that's kind of it. I mean, I'm not a big adventurer, so I don't travel. I'm not an outdoorsy guy. I don't like to go camping. I went camping once and it was awful, and I said that's never going to happen again. Things like that. So, with our dogs, we're always worried to leave them behind, so we don't travel too many exotic places, and I have a crippling fear of flying anyway, so that's problematic. But so we do what we can here. Halloween's a big season for us. We do a lot of decorating, and trying to be the creepy couple that has the cool Halloween decorations up this time of year. So
nice. All right. So any lasting advice for aspiring authors?
Yeah, you kind of got to just do it. That's the problem that I run into a lot with aspiring authors. I am a big advocate for, it's basically what I do, for the first draft brain dump. Like, a lot of people I know who are aspiring authors, they will write like a few pages and then spend the next 6 months worrying about those first few pages and whether or not they're right. And they'll rewrite them and rewrite them and rewrite them. And I'm like, no, what you do is you dump the whole first draft. I mean, I've literally had a problem with a scene in one of my books where I hadn't really worked out all the details about why the characters did what they did. And I wrote in the first draft a scene where the characters talk about, hey, you know what? That didn't really make any sense. I wonder why why did we do that? I don't know. Maybe we should. And I worked out my plot problem in the story. And then in the second draft, I just removed that scene and added the elements that they talked about into the scene that I was having trouble with and continued on. Like, brain dump that first draft. Don't worry about editing or misspellings or any of that if you can. And for some people, that's too much to ask. Get it done. Write the first story. We need stories. I mean, people think there are too many authors and too many books, and I say that can never happen. Like, whatever it is, whatever genre you want to do. If you want to write a memoir, do it. If you want to write a romance novel, do it. A detective novel. I write detective novels in addition to horror. So go ahead and do it. And when that first draft is done, then you worry about it. And if you have to send it off to someone else to read, so you get a little distance, so that when they come back with edits, you're more comfortable editing, which is my case, do that. But you got to get the story out. Quit fussing so much about, I think that George R.R. Martin does that, because he's talked to Stephen King about, have you ever spent 3 days writing a single sentence, and you finally write it, and then you hate that sentence, and so you delete it, and then you curse yourself and wish you had become a dentist instead? And Stephen King said, no, that doesn't happen to me. And I'm like, that's me. I don't worry about that. I worry about that later. Like, and the stories have kicked around in my head long enough that usually by the time I'm ready to write it, it's kind of all there. And then it just comes flowing through me. It can't happen to everybody, but if you got to outline, great, but you got to get past the outline and write the story. That's what I would suggest. Get out of your own way and just write it, and don't worry about it. You will find your voice if you do it enough, and you will find the way that works for you. And once you get through that first one, it actually does get easier. So, yeah. So,
well, and I think I've referenced the quote before on the podcast, but I want to say Neil Gaiman has a quote that says, like, you write your first draft to do it, and then you write your second draft acting like you knew what was going to happen the whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
And
yeah.
so, but yeah, definitely, get it down, write it, and then, and I would say there can't be too many stories because, I know some authors that kind of look at, well, if you're reading that person's book, you're not going to read my book or something. Yeah. And which to me is dumb because a reader will always be able to read a book faster than we can write them.
Yeah. Always.
And there's no way we can write as fast as a reader can read.
Yeah.
And so, and I always look at it as, if you wrote a, kaiju book and I wrote a kaiju book, if they read your book, there's a good chance they may want to read my book, right? Because they obviously like that genre. I enjoy vampires. And I write about vampires and I also enjoy reading about vampires. Yeah. And I'll read multiple books because they're about vampires.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's exactly the point too. It's like the stories may be similar, but they'll be just different enough that people will want to read them. And, I think it's such a great time for horror. There's so many great writers out there. So it's a great time to read and it's a great time to start writing because I think the more voices we have taking their own unique look at, whatever monsters you want or invent some new ones, that'd be great. I mean, it's just fun because as a fan, it's fun for me too to find out what other people's takes on things are. That's why I love reading all the time. I could have just stopped reading a long time ago, but I'm always wanting to read the next thing because someone like you or Andrew Nashberg or MJ Mars has a whole different take on something else that I read before. And it's awesome. And I love reading that kind of stuff. So, that's why it's been fun to be part of like the Wicked House team and some of these other indie presses just because and I'm part of the Horror Writers Association here in Chicago. And whenever we get together, us and the horror writers, we just bounce ideas off each other. And it's so great. And I just love all of that stuff. So it's, just write. We need the stories. Don't think you're going to get lost. You'll be found by the right people. So.
All right. Well, it's been great having you on the show. So before we, sign off, where can my listeners learn more about you?
I do have a website. BryanWAlaspa.com. That's one word, BryanWAlaspa.com. I have a blog that I update almost daily there. And the homepage always has, I try to always update it with the latest things that are coming out, or the most recent things. You can, of course, find me at Amazon, and all of my books are available in Kindle and print edition, and there are plenty that are also audiobooks now. You can find When the Night Comes Out at your favorite place to listen to podcasts, and also at YouTube. That's kind of it. I have a few short stories on my current publisher. I've been working a lot with Baynham Press, Baynam Press books. I have a few short stories that are just available in Kindle editions through that website right now. But if you just search my name, you'll find me. But I'm all over the socials. I'm all over those places. But those are the best places to look off the top of my head. So.
Gotcha. All right. Well, and I'll make sure and we'll put all the links in the show notes and all that kind of good stuff as well. So make it easier for people to find you. Again, at the time this episode comes out, your Halloween edition of When the Night Comes Out will be out. So definitely go listen to that. Your latest novel, The Witch of November, will be out. Yep. So make sure go grab a copy of that if you haven't already.
Yep.
And that's about it.
Sounds great.
So it's been great having you on the show. I appreciate you hanging around and chat with me for a little while.
It was so much fun. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me talk for an hour or so. I appreciate it, Brad.
Not a problem.
Take care.
All right. You as well. Well, that's it for the Night Crew podcast and my conversation with Bryan W. Alaspa. I have links to where you can find Bryan in the show notes. Follow him on all the socials, pick up his books, and listen to his podcast When the Night Comes Out. So if you had a good time, make sure to follow the show, share it with a friend, and leave a rating. Hopefully 5 stars. If you want updates on my writing, You can, of course, follow me on Facebook or TikTok at Bradrick's Author. You can find copies of my novels wherever you like to buy books. But if you hop over to my website, bradricks.com, you can purchase signed copies of any of my novels, especially the Night Crew 2 book, which is now available. Get your copy today if you haven't already. I'm Brad Ricks, reminding you to stay out of graveyards after dark, question people who don't show up in mirrors, and don't get too scared of the creature under the bed. I mean, he just wants to eat too. Until next time, keep your curtains drawn, your sense of humor sharp, and your blood inside your body. Thanks for listening.